Welcome to Church and State with Brian McCall and Chris Ferrara. We have had an incredible week this past week when this show comes out. For only the second time in American history, a person has been elected to non-consecutive terms. President, not president, president. Not since Grover Cleveland have we seen that. And really, this is more extraordinary than Cleveland's comeback because Cleveland was not being convicted and threatened to be thrown in jail in 2 states and 2 federal courts, had not been attempted to be impeached twice, called a Nazi, and still had a vast majority of the American voters vote for him.
And almost had his head blown off for good
Or had
measure.
his head blown off. Oh, I forgot that one. Almost had his head blown off. You're
Plus
right.
the attempted assassination at the golf course by the guy crouching in the bushes for 12 hours that nobody seemed to notice.
So really a stunning victory for him. And both, he looks like he's going to win the popular vote, which obviously
That's done. He's 5 million votes ahead.
Yeah. I mean, which is not technically relevant for legal purposes, but just an incredible sweep of the states, particularly in these Democrat strongholds, Michigan, Wisconsin, even Pennsylvania, which he won in some of those cases with even greater margins than he did in 2016. Interestingly, the Democrats all talk about kumbaya, we're all going to hold hands and build our rainbow coalition, but all they do is turn people against each other. I mean, this is a man who received phenomenal support from groups, quote, as diverse as young male men, white women, young 18 to 26-year-old men, first-time voters, right? Hispanic men. I mean, it's amazing. It's kind of like he is the candidate unifying across. I mean, winning Miami-Dade County in Florida, for example, winning Orange County in California, is certainly something no Republican's done for a long time.
And Nevada and Arizona on that map have gone red. So now he has 312 electoral votes. He swept every battleground state. So Democrats can't figure out why this happened. I can explain it for them.
Right.
If you run a pair of lunatic buffoons as your candidate, a cackling moron can't put 2 coherent sentences together unless they're on a teleprompter, and even then she has trouble, and that frenetically arm-waving zany character from Minnesota who pretends he's a hunter and can't even load his shotgun. If you run 2 crackpots, in other words, as your candidate, it won't even tell you what they stand for, but are standing for the most radical liberal policies in the history of this country, which they tried to hide, you're going to lose. Yeah. And they lost. And the American people, by way of the popular vote and these electoral college sweep, have said, you people are crazy. We're not putting you in power for another 4 years. Enough of this nonsense. So I have some remaining faith now in a system that even with a substantially morally degenerated body politic could produce an outcome like this, an outcome of moral revulsion, even though, let's say, it was primarily driven by economics. Okay, fine. So that might be the mainspring of what happened here, but the rickety contraption of the founders is still functioning.
Yes. And I will say, and the Electoral College worked.
We've said this before. That was their introduction of the Electoral College concept into the Constitution, and I say this in my book, Liberty of the God That Failed, was a masterstroke. As a legal document, the Constitution is, in fact, a masterpiece of draftsmanship, which shows that the men of the 18th century were not illiterate fools, but highly educated men. So on paper, the structure was very carefully crafted. And if not for the Electoral College, even now, though, if we had direct democracy, Trump would have won by 5 million votes.
He still would have, but it really shows, again, how he was able to build this coalition. Because, if you look at the map where the counties are, et cetera, essentially the Democrats could just go to like 7 cities and try to win the popular vote and basically say to people in Iowa, I don't really care about you. Where you can't build, you have to build a coalition. You have to talk to the whole country at some level. And that showed the stronger candidate that did that won.
Well, so. If you made a movie of this, critics would pan it because the plot would be so ridiculous.
That's true.
No one could possibly believe it. A billionaire who's close to the people decides to run for the presidency. The powers that be sense that this guy is an outsider who's really going to shake up the status quo. So let's target him for fake FBI investigations. Let's impeach him. Let's indict him 4 times over. Let's try to get him removed from the ballot. And when that fails, let's try to blow his head off at short range with a rifle from a guy on the roof who shouldn't have been there. And not only did all of that fail, it increased his popularity at every step. Because, here, I think we can go beyond economic motives. I think the American people see what is happening with Trump. They know that anyone so fiercely opposed by the powers that be must be the candidate for them.
Yes.
If they don't want us to have him, maybe that's the guy we should have.
Yes.
People walk up to that reality. And now I think we're going to see some pretty amazing developments, assuming he survives until the inauguration.
Well, and that's the next question. What do you think is going to happen?
Oh, they forget it. They're going to accept this quietly. Even if their hearts are filled with rage, they're not going to prevent certification. There's nothing they can do. There haven't been any riots. We expected riots.
Yeah.
But the mandate was so overwhelming. The repudiation of these lunatics was so resounding and so broad spectrum, embracing everybody, all colors, all creeds, all economic classes, that the steam has gone out of their resistance. They're not going to do anything. And Biden, by the way, just gave a speech today.
Yeah.
He was beaming over the outcome because it says to the world that they shouldn't have gotten rid of me.
Right. Well, it's interesting. CNN, which was funny. My wife almost killed me. I said, let's turn on CNN around 10:30 or 11. She said, why? I don't want to watch that. I said, I don't want to even watch it, but I want to know what's going on because I saw Elon Musk over at Tucker say he looked at all the data and he'd won these states. It's just obvious he won. Why aren't they announcing it? So I said, well, I just want to see what they look like. So we turned it on. And aside from observing, since the last time I watched CNN 20 years ago, they only hire lesbian and gay people. Like every person that came on the screen was. After 2 minutes, I said, he's won the election. I said, what are you talking about? I said, look at these people. They look like their mother just died in front of them. I mean, they know. They're just not saying it. And then, lo and behold, 3 hours later, it was true.
Right.
But they believed their own propaganda, and they put up, this was interesting, a map of all the states and said, we want to show you the counties in which Harris got more votes than Biden did in 2020. And it was a blank map, literally
blank,
the entire country. So they might have done better with the senile old man.
Think of the implications here. What this means is the following, that the media, the political establishment in Washington, the intelligence community, the whole ensemble of celebrities have no credibility whatsoever. Nobody listens to any of them anymore. So much so, the repudiation is so resounding that he won a 5 million vote margin in the popular vote. Yeah. Even if you throw in California and New York.
Yeah.
Because he got so many votes in California and New York. I think he got 30% of California, or maybe even 40%, and a similar percentage in New York State. And now New Jersey, he lost by only 5 points. New Jersey is now a swing state.
Yeah.
And if we get a booming Trump economy and what they would consider to be the golden age of America, which means essentially money, 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 then at the next election, your next president is going to be Vance.
Well, going back to what may happen now, one of their attacks was lawfare. So at least the Department of Justice has done the first honorable thing in the last 4 years. They announced that Jack Smith will be gone before the inauguration day. So the illicit prosecutor that, according to Judge Cannon, had no constitutional authority, he'll be gone. They're withdrawing their appeal and withdrawing the D.C. case. But what do you think is going to happen? I mean, he's got a sentencing hearing in 2 weeks in New York. What do you think is going to happen in New York and Georgia? By the way, I'll note, in Georgia, Funny Willis got reelected.
Of course.
Yes.
But, before we get to the state cases, are you telling me that they withdrew the 11th Circuit appeal on the dismissal?
I don't know if they have technically withdrawn it yet, but they announced they were withdrawing the cases. So I don't know if
I think they're going to pursue the 11th Circuit appeal because they want this idea of a special counsel with no statutory authority. Just at whim, you appoint a special counsel without a congressional, without confirmation by the Senate. They want that to continue. But I think the Trump DOJ will probably drop the appeal. And Cannon was so courageous to issue that decision. Basically, this was the Meese amicus brief in the Supreme Court where Edward Meese said, this guy has no more authority to prosecute this case than a list of celebrities that he put in the brief. And Judge Cannon said, you got a point. He has no authority. Gone. So it's turned to the state cases. The Georgia case is dead.
Yeah.
Because the Georgia Court of Appeals is still hearing the disqualification motion. And now that Trump has been elected, if she doesn't withdraw the case and she's stupid enough to keep it going, she is a total moron.
She is stupid enough. I mean, that's a given.
She'll keep it going. The Georgia Court of Appeals will just disqualify her. And then once she's disqualified, her whole entire office will be disqualified, which means it has to be shipped out to another prosecutor's office, and no one's going to take it. That case is gone. Okay. I hear that Mershon, the judge in New York, considering the conviction, which is filled with error, and is going to be reversed, is now reconsidering the sentencing. And he might just say, let's forget it. He might tell the attorney, he might tell Bragg to move for dismissal, or Bragg might move for dismissal. There's no possible way they can sentence him while he's president, at least not to a sentence of incarceration. It's all gone. I predicted this weeks ago. Every one of these phony cases is going down the tubes if he gets elected.
So what do you think is likely to happen in the next 4 years then? So assuming he makes it to Inauguration Day, and let's even assume he's got the Senate. Let's assume, as I think is most likely, he will have at least a slim majority in the House of Representatives. What do you think we'll see?
I think we'll see another 4 years like the years that began in 2016. He'll make the tax cuts permanent. At least one or more justices will retire from the Supreme Court, and he'll be able to appoint, this time I hope, reliable conservatives.
Yeah.
Gorsuch is a real winner.
Yeah.
Somebody like Gorsuch. Kavanaugh's wishy-washy, and we won't say anything about Amy Coney Barrett. So he'll get a chance to appoint at least one successor justice, maybe two. And ideally, it would be one of the liberals who retires or passes away. And
honestly, on that, I really hope Clarence Thomas does the right thing because of his age. The time to resign is now, to make sure he's replaced, not in the chance that there's another, president. Given his age, I hope he does, because
I'm sure he's considering that. Yeah. I'm sure that's being reviewed now, but he's going to have communication, probably indirectly, as to the likelihood of a solid replacement.
Yes.
Although he is a real treasure.
He is a treasure. I'd hate to see him go, but I'd hate to see him be replaced by a Democrat president.
And then the border will be closed. He's going to issue a slew of executive orders on day one, closing the border. They promise deportations will begin on day one. I'm not sure how that's going to be implemented, but I guess you can start with known criminals. He's going to do something about the cartels. He might use the National Guard or even the U.S. military to confront them at the border. The apartment buildings taken over in Colorado, those will be evacuated. He's going to unleash the energy capacity of the United States. We'll be back to energy independence. The stock market will boom. I cannot comprehend, by the way, any Catholic who can sit on his high horse and say, sit out this election. That is lunacy. We have a duty to mitigate harm to the common good. What these people don't understand, and I'm afraid this is a rather dim-witted analysis on their part, is that in a binary political system, when it's A or B, if you sit it out and you are a potential A, you're voting for B.
Yes.
So if you tell people who would vote for A to sit out the election, even though they would have voted for A, you're telling them to vote for B. Anyone who says you should sit out this election or should have sat out this election was essentially saying, a Catholic saying this, vote for Harris.
Yes.
I can understand why the people who think that they're morally nuanced in their analysis of this election, don't get simple math, which is why in this two-party system, there's a moral obligation to vote for the lesser of the problematic candidates in order to mitigate harm to the common good. I know one priest commentator who argued that it's probably sinful not to vote. What would have happened if she had won?
It's a dystopian nightmare.
We would have had a dystopian nightmare. Yes. We would have had a transgender tyranny. Yeah. We would have had suppression of freedom of speech throughout the internet. All the pro-lifers in jail would have remained there until they rot, along with the January 6th walkabout people in the Capitol building. who are sentenced to years in prison for simple trespass. That's just for starters. Then the judges that she would have appointed, ideologues in black robes, disregarding common sense and all legal precedent to get the desired result. And then, of course, Supreme Court replacements, cementing in for 50 years at least a 5-4 liberal majority on the Supreme Court. How any Catholic could just ignore these potential consequences and tell people effectively vote for Harris, it just blows my mind.
Yes.
Absolute stupidity.
I agree with you, definitely. I had more sympathy for prior elections where it maybe wasn't A and B, it was A subprime 1, A subprime 2. Okay, but this presented a stark contrast. They were really two different things.
And America reflected that.
Yes.
The contrast was so stark, the divide was so dramatic, the potential consequences so enormous that he swept the country both in the popular vote and the Electoral College, because people were terrified of what would happen if those two lunatics were elected. I'm gonna stress this again. One note Johnny. Okay, that's what I'm gonna be today. Any Catholic who would say effectively vote for those two lunatics has lost his own mind.
I couldn't say it any stronger than that, I think. Well, speaking of lunacy, let's turn over to Rome and the Synod on synodality has finally ended. And I wanted to get your thought on more than so they produced a document, but I want to get your thoughts on the actual absurdity that this process has come to. Because this document that was voted on by the packed synod, packed with all the cronies of Francis, had a document. There were 1,000 amendments to that document the morning it was voted on, and it was voted on with 1,000 new amendments they'd never seen before.
Sounds like the omnibus spending bill.
It sounds like Nancy Pelosi. Vote for it, and then you can read what's in it later. And then the Pope, typically in these modern abominations of synods, they'd have this document, then the Pope would be a safeguard on that, and he wouldn't do anything with the document. He'd use it as a basis to write an apostolic exhortation, picking maybe out of it what could be used, what couldn't. But Francis basically just, on the spot, gave his imprimatur to it and adopted it as a papal document. One of those things that got slid into the end that I've heard from several bishops that participated that didn't know even was there was this openness to deaconesses would continue. So a typical statement, although we don't have any doctrinal authority yet, and it's not with the history of the church, we think it's an open question whether there can be an ordained deaconess, got slipped in one of these 1,000 amendments. So what's your comments on that novel process?
Well, this is the apex achievement of the pseudo-magisterium. And that's what we've had for 60 years now, the pseudo-magisterium. Documents that have no real authority, documents that depart from the constant teaching of the church, documents produced by irregular bodies, such as this absurd synod, which includes lay people as people with a vote, and it has no binding effect whatsoever. It doesn't matter what he says about it. Father Gruner always said this: anything that departs from the constant teaching of the church, either the ordinary magisterium or the extraordinary magisterium proclaiming a dogma after constant teaching of the ordinary magisterium, anything that departs from that deposit of the faith can't be the magisterium. There's only one magisterium, authentic teaching. If it's not authentic teaching, it's fake magisterium. Ergo, not the magisterium. Duh. I mean, that should be obvious. So whatever this document says that departs from the constant teaching of the church is useless, worthless, must be disregarded. I don't care what he says about it. I don't care what imprimatur he gives to it. And it's also quite impossible for him to do that on the day of without even having reviewed the document.
Yeah.
So he hasn't really actually exercised any magisterial function here. He's just rubber stamped a document by a bunch of non-entities claiming to speak for the Holy Ghost, which is another ludicrous aspect of this whole synodal process. It's Illuminism at its worst. We call upon the Holy Ghost, who will inspire us with the latest bulletin from on high.
Exactly. Well, and again, we'll talk a little bit about the substance. We already talked about they've opened the door to more. So it's a closed case, but we've opened the door to consider more whether women can become ordained deacons.
Yeah,
uh,
the case is closed, but the door is open. Right.
yeah,
Typical modernism.
exactly. And I'll tell you my prediction on that. What I think they're going to do is they're going to just do it de facto. So they're going to do what they did with altar boys, dress girls up, let them do it, until John Paul II just said, "I guess you got it," with communion in the hand. So here's what I think they're just going to tell people: go dress women up in dalmatics, let them preach, have a little institution ceremony that doesn't involve quote ordination, and then it'll just be presented as a fait accompli and say, "Look, now we need
They're
more."
already doing it in a lot of places, mostly Germany, I would think. They have women in albs preaching or
Yes.
appearing to preach. So yeah, that's probably the model for getting this done. Same way with communion in the hand, and again, as Father Gruner pointed out, even when Paul VI authorized communion in the hand reluctantly, he insisted in that document, the name of which now escapes me, that communion on the tongue while kneeling remains the law of the church and has always been the law of the church. So the exception will once again swallow the rule. That's how they operate.
So that was one. The other major issue that was brought up before was this idea that was floated there of giving doctrinal authority to individual bishops. So you could have essentially the breakup of the Catholic Church and have the American Catholic Church, the German Catholic Church, the African Catholic Church, etc. Basically, the Anglican, uncommunion communion. They didn't exactly get what they wanted, but I want to read to you what they have in a little bit on this.
Yeah, please do,
Get your
because I have
thought.
paid no attention to this insanity anyway. So you
Yeah.
might as well tell me now.
So 93. So this is
First
on
impression.
the same reasons that led to the birth of national Episcopal conferences, led to the creation of councils of Episcopal conferences at the level of macro regions or continents. And in the case of Eastern Rite Catholic churches, of the Assembly of the Holy Churches and of the Council of Patriarchs. These structures encouraged consideration of the enculturation of the gospel in different contexts, keeping in mind the challenges of globalization, and play their part in manifesting the beauty of the varied face of the church in its Catholic unity. The ecclesiological significance and canonical status should be studied in depth, bearing in mind the fact that they can encourage processes of synodal participation in each major socio-cultural region, starting from the specific conditions of the life and culture that mark the churches which are a part of their unique region.
First question: did Kamala Harris participate in the synod?
She drafted it, actually.
Look, that's a lot of gobbledygook,
Yeah.
and I sense already, I detect already a category confusion.
Yeah.
Revelation and globalization are two different categories. I'm not sure what globalization has to do with revealed truth or with the doctrines flowing from revealed truth as given to us by our Lord and the apostles. I'm not sure what globalization has to do at all with Catholic teaching about faith and morals. But, again, we said this again and again. That idea of melding together this notion of we have to consider globalization and culturation. This shows, as Romano Amerio so famously observed, and I've said it before, I'll say it again: the loss of essences in post-conciliar thinking, the obliteration of the distinction between one thing and another, and in this case between Catholic doctrine and worldly considerations. They're all merging together in this pig's breakfast of a document, which I haven't read one line of, I confess.
Well, it's about like me watching CNN for a few minutes on election night. It's probably not worth it, but you might get a good laugh out of it.
I did watch The View. It was quite hilarious.
Oh, wait, so has Whoopi Goldberg left the country, by the way? I thought she said she would leave the country if Trump were elected. She
Yeah,
left,
no.
right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, she still here. And I watched that panel of midwits lamenting the outcome of the election. And actually, midwits is a compliment to these people.
Right.
And they just couldn't understand how it happened. Couldn't understand why the American people rejected a couple of lunatics running for the highest offices in the land.
Yep.
They just don't comprehend it. They don't comprehend that they're lunatics.
Well,
they are the lunatics who have been running the asylum.
Right.
And as Trump said, we have now regained control of our country. That's
Yes,
exactly it.
it is. Well, speaking of nitwits, I want to end on a lighter note. I'd like to get your reaction to another nitwit idea. So, during the end of the Synod, the Vatican had a great unveiling ceremony. They unveiled the mascot of the Jubilee year. I want to get your reaction to this
Oh, yeah, come
incredible
on. Are you
image. I'm
serious?
serious. This is the new Loose, the mascot for the Holy Year.
This is I think the adversary is laughing his tail off right now, because what has happened here is that the church has become a parody of itself. The human element of the church is now a self parody.
Yes.
I don't think Babylon B could improve on this.
No,
I,
no. I mean, they could have at least gone with Peanut the squirrel. But
I think Peanut. By the way, I think Peanut the squirrel might have gotten Trump 1,000,000 votes.
he might have. You're
Because,
right.
in this emotivist age, when you start killing off lovable little pets and
Yeah,
people know that the Democrats did it, that's 1,000,000 votes right there.
yeah. I think you're right. But no, honestly, the new church is a cartoonish church, so I think they have an appropriate mascot.
Oh, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
So, we conclude on the note that we always conclude: when things get this bad, there's a turnaround. And in a little way, it happened in the American political
It
scene.
did.
Things had reached an absolute nadir of insanity, and now we have a reprieve. I'm not suggesting that we're going to see some kind of Christian revival, but as we discussed last time, we're at the event horizon of the black hole, and we've been pulled back again just before we
Yes.
reach it.
Yes. And if anything, it's like what is one of the possible effects of extreme unction? It may help you on your way, or it may bring health to the body to buy you more time because you need to do something before your final judgment. So maybe in many ways, as a country, it's maybe the same effect. The body politic was on the verge of death, and it got pulled back from that for a few minutes to give us another spiritual chance to convert. And let's just pray we make use of it. Well, there you have it. Thank you, Chris. And we'll see you in a couple weeks as we get 2 weeks closer to the transition of power back to the Trump people and see what's happening then. God bless.